like since the loss? How have you gone about reviewing it?
Oh, the same way we always do, hopefully. But I think the players are the best judge of that. But look, we had a poor one, and we're not hiding away from that by any stretch of the imagination. Look, we recognise, and I've said it a lot, just how difficult the competition is and how difficult it is for teams to be at their best every week. But that's no excuse to be as off as we were. So the challenge this week is to not over correct, especially as a coaching group, but acknowledge that we need to be sharper going into this week. And to this point, we feel like we've had a good prep, and we're going to need it because watching the Kangaroos, they look a different side post-bye to the one they were before, and they're in good form. But you could say that about a lot of teams at the moment, that they're at their best, they're dangerous. Every team, I'd say.
I was going to ask you about the Brews. Like, can you believe, I suppose, how much they've improved since pretty much pre-bye? They've almost won more games than they've lost.
Well, they've been really competitive in games, that's for sure. But yeah, I can believe it. I think it's entirely predictable, and you look at the talent that they have, and we accept that a lot of that talent is young talent, and traditionally that means you can be a bit up and down, but over time that smooths out to improvement, and that's I think I've watched every team this year, and especially I'd highlight the teams that have had some bad games. They've also had other games where they look like a finals team as well. So that's just the environment we find ourselves in, and you just, I guess, sort of not get too distracted by the evenness of the comp and the quality of the comp, and just make sure you get yourselves right, which is kind of where we are at.
Mitch Duncan had a bit to say on the ground surface the other day. Has that impacted training at all this week?
Oh, a little bit, but that's just winter in Victoria, and we're very lucky here. We have access to what I think is the best surface in Australia. But in the middle of winter, there are some challenges. But anyone that's played footy for a decent, amount of time in Victoria understands what late July and August can be like.
That's a non-factor for the result at the end of the day. You don't really take that into any consideration.
No, 100, but that's the only.
Just had one of those days.
Yeah, I think there's just, no, I'd love to be able to point to that and say that it was more of an issue for us than it was for the opposition, but it's the same for both teams. And we looked at a number of things. Let's say there were 10 or 20 things that we looked at, and we didn't even start thinking about the surface. Like, I think I said post-game we didn't play the conditions very well, but that's what being a professional team's all about. Some weeks you're under the roof at Marvel, the next week you're down in Hobart where it's very different, and sometimes you get some wet games. And again, I said post-game that's not a pattern. We've been pretty good at adapting to the conditions and playing the way that the conditions dictate. And so that was really disappointing that we didn't get that right, because it's, if that was something that we consistently did, then we'd put a lot more work into it. But it did take us a bit by surprise that we didn't adapt as well as the opposition.
You're looking forward to some warmer weather?
Down in Hobart. Yeah, I mean, I think...
You've got to be pretty well prepared for it, though.
Yeah, no, we've had a good period of acclimatisation for the Tasmanian winter, but I think the most interesting thing is that the different venues that you do play around the competition now, and you have Marvel at one end of the spectrum where the Kangaroos play a lot. And probably the conditions we played in last week here, and then what you sometimes get down in Hobart is almost at the other end of the spectrum. So it's interesting, but it does create some challenges, because it's not, at least in our opinion, it's not where you just roll out the same way of playing. You've got to adapt to it, and that's exciting for us.
Do you take any learnings from the Darwin trip? Going state, obviously that game didn't quite work out as you hoped. Did you take any learnings from that prep, or are you pretty confident in how you prep for that game?
Yeah,
this one as well.
I couldn't think of anything more different than Darwin heat to Hobart in the middle of winter.
No,
You know,
it's
even-
just, just going into states and from that point of view.
Yeah, not
when you leave and what you do before the game, that kind of stuff.
no.
That's big.
We travel every year. We've got a really well understood program. So yeah, well, I mean, I guess we try to adjust things when the evidence demands it, but we don't sort of chop and change. We've got a pretty consistent program where we feel like we'll be well prepared.
How close to settling your 23 are you, Chris, for Saturday?
Oh, no, pretty close. Yeah, we've got a little bit of work to do before we leave tomorrow, but no, we're pretty close.
What does Atkins need to, does it just need to get through training today?
In theory, but it's probably a little bit more than that. It's a little bit out of my hands, to be honest, but it's more than just get through. He needs to prove that he's 100% right to play, so that's on the table, but not something we have clarity on right now.
Will Neil come back in? Is that as simple as that, or is he?
Yeah, likely. Yeah, that's our thinking. Yeah.
What about Tanner Bruin? It's pretty good in the VFL.
Yeah, Tanner will come back. Yeah, it was good for him to get that game under his belt, and he looked sharp as anyone could in those conditions, and it was worse for the early game than it was for the AFL game. But importantly, I've said it before, he with that wrist, he's in good running form. He's at least the evidence that we've got, and listening to him, he feels as fit as he has all year, and the wrist got through really well, so he's ready to play well.
The uneducated will go, gee, he's so good in the VFL, why didn't he play at 7:30 instead of 3:30? Can you just give us, for what you can, a bit of an insight into the decision playing in the VFL?
It's always case-by-case basis for us, and I think there are examples across the competition where, say, Will Ashcroft came back for the Lions after 12 months out, or whatever it was, with an ACL and plays first up. We brought Cam Guthrie back for an AFL game after not playing for a year and a half, basically. And I think these things are as much art as they are science. And we chose, I think the bottom line, it's more complicated than this, but the bottom line, simple version is we just decided to be a bit more conservative and make sure that there wasn't anything that we weren't aware of before he came back into an AFL game. And sort of he ticked all those boxes. And in hindsight, you always look at it and say, oh, he played well enough to think he could have come straight back into our AFL team. But it's a little bit of a guess, that stuff. And when it works, you say, great decision. And when it doesn't, you think, how could we do that? Why didn't we just take the more conservative route? So there's a whole lot of data and evidence that sort of sits in below that I'm not going to go into. But yeah, if anyone's saying he looked like he could have played in the AFL team and contributed, I'm not going to argue with them.